Greetings ladies and gents, welcome back to the Craft Hammer. I'm your host Stefan. In this video we're going to be looking at the practicalities of how exactly do you start your first army. We will have obviously a visual example just to help out, and this is more specific for an individual who is starting the hobby themselves. If you happen to have watched my previous video just 2 videos ago, that seemed to have gone down pretty well and we had some positive feedback and a lot of discussion in the comment section. Give your thoughts below on what you think is the best way for a new beginner to start collecting an army. Make sure to subscribe and like this video, really helps us out. But more importantly, what I want to do in this video, similar to the one before, is to give a basic rundown. Hopefully it will help a new person decide on how exactly they're gonna spend their money, which it's not a cheap hobby, but at the same time it's not the most expensive. You do want to make sure that you are getting your dollar's worth, and of course at the end of the day you want to be able to use your army and not needlessly spend on something that you may not want further down the line. So hopefully in this video I will help guide you on some of the basics and whether or not you should get certain things. Let's get into it and discuss what is the best way to start your army. So if you're new out there, let's start from the very beginning. You might have gone into Games Workshop itself and you would have likely seen those introductory boxes that they have. I believe they come in 3 tiers, where the higher the tier, the more models are contained within. At the current time of the filming, we do have the Leviathan ones, which are Space Marines versus Tyranids. Now, there's 2 things to note and very important when you're looking at these starter boxes. If you and a friend happen to be starting at the same time and one of you likes the Space Marines and one of you likes the Tyranids, it does make sense to get one of these starter boxes. They will help you get into the hobby. They are a nice little introductory box that will help you understand some basic things, how to build, how to paint, and of course there is a nice little guide inside when it comes to playing. But if you are one individual person and your intent is to get into the hobby, I would highly advise against these introduction boxes. Normally what happens is you might have that initial honeymoon period where you like both the Space Marines and the Tyranids. Maybe in the next edition it will be a different army that's within. Either way, you may like both armies at that initial period, but normally what happens is you focus on one, you ignore the other, and it does feel like you wasted money on that second army that eventually most people seem to sell. They don't normally stick with both armies that come within these starting options. I myself, when I got the Leviathan box, I specifically got it because I wanted just the Space Marines, and then I sold the Tyranids to someone else who wanted those. Most people don't really stick to 2 armies right at the same time, especially when they're starting, because they normally want to get to be able to play with either one faction that really hits home, so they normally just focus on that. So if you do come in a pair and you have a friend who's starting with you and you happen to both like the factions that are in the starter boxes, definitely get them. But if you're a single individual person, you might want to go towards something that is called a combat patrol box. The combat patrol box is generally supposed to be around 500 points worth of models, and it's a nice starter to any force generally, but that's not always the case. And this is where we need to do a few caveats to make sure that either you're not buying models that you don't want, or you're not listening to other people and then buying something that you never actually wanted. So let's get into the combat patrol box and whether or not it's a good starting point for you. I am going to assume that you've watched the previous video regarding on what faction to choose, and you've chosen that faction within your mind. Now, if you're gonna go to, let's say, a hobby group or some hobby friends, and they might give you some advice, they might say, oh, don't get that specific combat patrol box because those models suck, or you need to get that one specifically for your faction because it is the best models ever. You have to understand that it's not always based on the looks that they're referring to. It normally is on how they play within the game. Not all models that are contained within a combat patrol box, sometimes they put in things that they have extra stock of. They've made too many and aren't selling with their normal boxes, so they want to put them into the combat patrol box so that they can entice people to sell that extra stock of the model that they might have. Now, that doesn't mean all combat patrol boxes are bad. There are some that are great starter pieces, and you do have a few gems in there where sometimes people get multiple of because it's such a great start and you have such good core infantry for your force that you might as well get it and not even bother spending extra money on separate boxes. At the recording of this time, there are two boxes that kind of stand out when it comes to models that are there where people don't really like it. I believe it is the Thousand Suns and also the Death Guard. For the Thousand Suns, they really like to push the Zangors, which is not really a unit that most people want to have in their force. It is very much a throwaway unit that a lot of Thousand Suns players don't really feel the need to have. They would prefer to get more Marines or Terminators, so they're not really interested at this very moment when it comes to the actual playability and the rules that the Thousand Suns have. And on the same note, a lot of Death Guard players already have, I believe they are the Poxwalkers, the ones that look like zombies. Not many people run a lot of those, or if they do, they have the amount that they want, so they're not going to get more of them. It's one of those things where combat patrols can obviously help new beginners get into the hobby, but it also is used by a lot of veteran players to expand their force, or if they intend to start a second, third, fourth, etc. army. So it's something that you will hear some combat patrols are being looked down upon because a lot of veteran players already have things that are contained within, or they know the rules for certain models and they don't like them because obviously they're not currently useful to be played with. So be cautious when you're taking advice on combat patrols, as some of them can be great starts to your army. They do have what I will be discussing in just a few moments when it comes to starting your force, and some of them are not liked because of the playability. Make sure to get some second opinions or ask some follow-up questions why exactly they would tell you not to buy a specific combat patrol. If you were not to take the intro boxes or the combat patrols, you have to then buy boxes and models individually at their individual prices. And of course, how exactly do you go about when it comes to starting your force in Warhammer 40k? Now, the rules for Warhammer 40k, the game itself, changes over time. Every new edition they like to change a few things, adapt some things, or maybe even a complete blank slate and build things up again. But there are some things that remain over time, and more importantly, there are certain concepts that will remain evergreen. In this case, we're going to be trying to give you some advice on one of those evergreen ideas. Now, when I started the hobby, this evergreen idea was always pushed for new beginners. And what does that actually mean for starting your force? Well, it is 2 troop choices and 1 HQ character. What exactly are troop choices? In today's game, I believe they're called battle line unit. So it is the bog standard unit of that force. Maybe not the weakest, but it is the unit that creates the bulk of that army, and in the lore it is the most common one. So for example, when it comes to Space Marines, the most common faction, it used to be the tactical squad, used to be your most bulk item, and of course now it's moved over to the intercessor. But they are both battle line / troop units. In other words, it means that most chapters are made up of intercessors or tactical units before they evolve into more elite options, heavy options, etc. Even though there are some amazing models out there, you should start your force with 1 HQ. It does not need to be a named character. Of course, if you liked a specific named character, you can obviously get them. It is a great start to your force. Otherwise, make sure to get yourselves 2 troop choices. A lot of combat patrol boxes generally have a battle line unit in there, maybe 2. Most have a 10-man battle line unit. A lot of these battle line units can then be split into 5-man groups. Now, in front of me here, I do have the custodies. We have a captain and we have 2 custodian guard squads. The maximum for these, I believe, is 5 units. I can't remember if you can put them up to 10. I'll have to double check. These ones are a great little start to any force. You get yourself your HQ, which is your captain, and you can buy 2 boxes of custodian guards. And there you go. That is the very beginning of any force. There are many options when it comes to building an army. A lot of armies can focus on elite options, on heavy options. It depends on the rules that are currently in that edition. Battle line units are generally a good foundation for any army. They are flexible in what they're able to do. Pretty good start for most people. Now, once you got your 2 basic troops and your hero character, you normally want a bit of firepower or even something cool that will help you really get into the lore of your army and get something that really stands out. So normally there was 2 choices, and if these were Space Marines, ironically enough this would also work because it is something quite common that would happen. You would get your 2 troops choices, HQ, and then of course you got a Terminator squad. So here we have some Terminators for the Custodes, which also works well in this scenario. You want something that comes in either by deep strike, or maybe you're putting them into a transport, something that comes in and really hits hard, really hits home the power of your army. An elite choice is normally what you would be recommended. Once you get your base, you get your elite, sometimes you want even more firepower, and that's where we normally would have gotten a Dreadnought. Luckily enough, the Custodes also fit in this scenario where you just add a Dreadnought. So that is the basic concept where you get your foundation, and of course this isn't enough to play a 2000 point army. You would need quite a bit more, but you could have always expanded these Custodes into an extra troops choice and then brought in your elite and maybe some heavy firepower. That is the general gist of how you should start an army, but it is not the only way that you can do this. Some forces you can go specifically into a lot of elite things. Before we move on to that, there are other armies that don't really follow this same pattern. For example, if you would like to become a knight player, either Chaos or Imperial, you're not really gonna have the same route as, say, the Custodes. You will be doing something either by getting the big knights, or you'll be getting some of these war dogs, and that's how you will build your army. So not everything falls under this template. Now if you're beginning, again, as I said, highly recommend this template to start off with, where you get your hero, your 2 troops choices, and from there you can start adding some firepower and start adding some more units to make sure that you're able to get your first game. We will give you some ideas that could help you out. You don't always have to go down this route. If you wanted, you could go for, let's say, the Imperial Guard, and if you really like tanks, there is an option there where you can build an army with just tanks. Now do remember, some of the armies that are more focused in this manner and that don't generally also need to have their battle lines, you're not going to be able to be adaptable to every single scenario, and there will be certain things where you won't be able to, let's say, capture an objective properly, or maybe you might be screened out and all of a sudden those tanks aren't able to move in the lanes that you might want them to. So make sure to remember that if you are going to go with some of these ideas that we're going to give, you have to understand not everything is going to work your way, and they might not work optimally. So there is the option of the Imperial Guard where you could just get tanks. Space Marines also have the option of focusing on specific elite heavy units. For example, for Dark Angels, you could potentially get yourself Lionel Johnson himself and then just build your army of Terminators and Deathwing Knights and only have the heaviest hitting things and get yourself up to 2000 points. Again, you won't be able to be adaptable to every single scenario, but if that's what you want, it is a possibility for you to do. Would I recommend it? Maybe not for your starting force. It is something that I would probably suggest doing as a second army where you want to focus on a specific theme. Themes are a very good way to start a second army so that you have an inspiration to go by. An all tank army, an all Terminator army, maybe you want only bikes. That is definitely something you can do as a second starting army. Whether or not it would be a good thing for a new beginner, it might be doubtful. It might make it more difficult for you to understand the game and figure out the best way to play. Now, I might be a tiny bit biased, but if you are looking for an easy army where you are able to do a hero and troop choices and you don't have to worry about too high of a model count, the Custodes would, ironically enough, be a great starting army. They are very good rules wise generally, of course, now and again with debuffs and debuffs when it comes to points. Some things fluctuate and go either above or below the 50% win rate. Overall, they are an easy army to paint, to build, and of course because of the low model count, you don't have to worry about making too many things and painting too many things. And again, rules wise, they're very forgiving for a new beginner with high armor saves, lots of damage, so you don't really have to worry too much about being wiped out super quick on the board. Hopefully this has helped you out. Just a quick wrap up, get yourself a hero character. Start off with 2 battle line units, get those built, get those painted, and then what you need is some sort of firepower, whether it's an elite unit or some sort of vehicle. Make sure to start slow. You don't need to buy everything straight away. It is both a learning process, but also something that you should be enjoying. It's supposed to be a quick and enjoyable process, not too long. You don't want to buy yourself 100 different units and all of a sudden you're bogged down, you don't know what to do. Make sure to keep it simple, start at the basics, and then add something that gives you a bit of firepower, add something that you think looks a bit cool, and eventually you will figure out that army, you will learn the rules, and things will get easier as time goes along. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. It's given you a bit of thought. Make sure to drop your comments down below if you're an experienced player and you have some ideas of which armies might be the best for someone to start off with. I of course am a bit biased and I think Custodes would be one of those easy enough armies to start for people. Make sure to like this video, really helps us out. Don't forget to subscribe. I will try and do a few more discussion videos here and there. I would of course like to do some book reviews, so that is something that I'm currently working in the process. And of course, hopefully soon enough you will also get some nice introductory tutorials for those of you who are new to the hobby and need to know some of the basics when it comes to building, when it comes to preparing your models, gluing, everything like that. It's going to be bite-sized chunks, so make sure to stay tuned for those. But for now, I hope you've had some wonderful hobbying time, and until next time, take care, folks.